Hello and welcome to November 2021 Qubit Tech Talk. I'm Josh Mandeville, the CTO of Qubit Networks, and we're going to talk about more virtualization infrastructure today. Last month, we talked about virtual machines and containers and hypervisors and all that. This month, we're going to kind of pick up where we left off and get into the infrastructure that runs your virtual software. First one we're going to talk about is what we call either traditional or aka legacy infrastructure. That design requires servers, storage networks, storage arrays, other networks, and usually those pieces are all separately managed, possibly by different manufacturers in each of those pieces. We're talking about compute, which is your RAM and your CPU usage, your storage, and your network. Those are always usually broken up into different pieces under the traditional legacy infrastructure for virtualization. Usually it takes a dedicated IT team to manage every single component, which leads to complexity. It's costly to manage. Downtimes are difficult. Luckily, some of the hypervisor software out there has helped alleviate that with the ability to vMotion, in case of VMware, to move machines around live and whatnot. But it's still difficult to manage because there's no one single management platform that manages the whole thing. There are some integrations, but even that's buggy sometimes. That led into what we call a converged infrastructure. It's basically the same stuff as the legacy network. It's just bundled together, usually by the same manufacturer. This leads to a less costly implementation because it's one throat to choke, so to speak. So you get all of your support and all of your implementation from one manufacturer that usually comprises of the compute and the storage, possibly the network hardware. Sometimes I've seen that not matter as much, and then presenting to the clients, your client machines through that same, basically kind of like traditional hardware, but it's bundled together. And that's what we call converged. I would say that in the converged era and the converged infrastructure, we moved to more sharing the network. We moved to network storage versus direct attach or even fiber channel network. So you didn't have to have separate switches or separate kinds of switches to bring your storage into your infrastructure. But that's converged infrastructure. And then we talk about hyper-converged infrastructure. And hyper-converged infrastructure is kind of a new animal. It's not that new, but it's newer. Nutanix was a leader in it, and now we have VMware jumping on and Scale, and they all have their hyper-converged infrastructure. But Nutanix was kind of the leader in it. And the idea behind it was we have all these server boxes with hard drive bays in them. They have the compute and memory. They have and the advancement of high-speed networking over the last couple of years, and that high-speed networking has gotten cheaper. It allows you to take all these boxes that we have, all of this compute in, all of this memory, all of this CPU, with a bunch of storage and high-speed network in between. Can't we just utilize the boxes that we're using to host virtual machines rather than have a separate storage, separate compute, separate network? We can link all these in the back of the servers, let's say, into one converged infrastructure, and they call that hyper-converged. I know there's kind of similar terms with converged and hyper-converged, but that's what they call hyper-converged, and that was coined early on in this concept. Basically, what that does is it allows for super scalability. You're not worried about different types of connections to your SAN. You're not worried about what direct attach storage in the legacy. You're not worried about all the different redundancies because it's built in. If you want to think about it, the difference between converged architecture and legacy is hardware based, basically a compute storage network building block approach, whereas hyperconverged is a software defined, where you're bringing all of those pieces in, and the software that runs on top of it, such as Nutanix, takes all of that bare metal of those different servers and combines them together and presents them to whichever software you use, VMware, Hyper-V, Nutanix, Acropolis, any of those. So I'm going to jump to a smaller screen, and we're going to look at a little bit here. Basically, we left off with virtual machines and the basic building blocks of the virtual machines. And this is what legacy hardware looks like legacy infrastructure. Usually you have, like I said, you have servers, you have storage network, fiber channel, or even direct attach. Then we get into the converged infrastructure, and this is all kind of sold as a bundle. And that presents less problems and a little less cost of entry, because you're getting it from one manufacturer, and usually it's bundled together, so it's more economical. And those are based, the legacy, like I said, the legacy and converged are built on compute, storage, network, building blocks. In other words, hardware. It's all hardware based, and some of it's got some management built in, and some of it's got some integrated management with your hypervisor, such as VMware. Then we get into the hyper-converged infrastructure. That takes all of your servers and combines them with network, and it's more software defined by the hyper-converged controlling software. And that combines all of your hard drives. Let's say, usually there's some flash, mixed spinning disk, all of this is a very high level overview, guys. It takes all of that storage, all of that compute, all of that, and combines it into one single package. Think of it as a software defined building blocks, whereas you're taking typical hardware, using all the resources, including the built-in storage of all the hardware, and presenting all of this hardware to a software that controls it, and then presents all of this hardware and manages all the resources to your hypervisor, such as VMware or Nutanix or Hyper-V. And this hyperconverged software version, this hyperconverged idea, what that brings to the table is the ability to scale. It has built-in redundancy, has built-in scalability. It's a pretty cool era. I see a lot of upside in the converged and hyperconverged area coming up here. I can't tell you which one you should use. It's kind of on a per case basis. I lean towards the hyperconverged idea just because of scalability, and it's a little more economical to get into, because you don't have to like over plan or over subscribe just to plan for the future. But if you have any questions, feel free to ask, give us a call, email us. I'm going to put a couple links to a few good articles on converged, hyperconverged, and legacy ideas of infrastructure. Hopefully you found this a little helpful, and we can help you figure out what you need. Thank you for listening, and see you next time.